Guide, we beseech the Almighty God, members of the Senate, that they may wisely deliberate for the good of this country and for the glory of your holy name. Honorable members, please join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pray be seated. Honorable members, pleasant good morning, and welcome to everyone. I'm happy to see those of you who have been traveling have returned.
Item number 3, oath of allegiance or affirmation of a new senator. Item number 4, messages from the Governor General. Item number 5, announcements by Madam President.
Thank you, Madam. Brief announcement just to remind us that today should conclude the 30th session of the Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The meeting is being held in Belém, Brazil, in our region. This is a GRULAC year for GRULAC to host, and we are hosting in Brazil. The conference has looked at the global stocktake, how it is we have crossed the 1.5 maximum line for carbon emissions and global temperature, a 1.5 line that we fought very hard to make sure that the world doesn't cross. Unfortunately, despite the Paris Agreement, we're way past that in an irregular fashion, but likely to become the norm. And the delegation of Grenada, led brilliantly by our very own veteran, Dr. Spencer Thomas, has been fighting on 3 or 4 fronts for the global stocktake to be adequate to meet our mitigation targets, for the adaptation, the new adaptation plan, for the climate finance goal, and for the continued recognition and support for small island developing states. So as they wrap up, hopefully today, if not tomorrow, bear in mind that our future and the future of all the small island states are on the line with the decisions that come out of Belém. Bear in mind Melissa, Category 5, which touched down in Jamaica, Haiti, the Turks and Caicos, and Cuba, can be averted if we are more ambitious in the future. So we pray that there is going to be more success and that Grenada continues to contribute to the highest ambition possible. Since we are going to, I know we are going to debate a bill on fisheries, I want to say that we have had a brilliant team, including our fisheries expert, our energy expert, water expert, at the conference. And they've been really shining this past 2 weeks. So when they come home, pay attention for their updates and reports, and be grateful to them that they have represented us once again on the world stage. And except to welcome you back and to say that we are at the cusp of a very festive season, I thank you and have concluded my announcements.
Item number 6, confirmation of minutes.
Honorable members, you have before you the minutes of our last sitting, and it is proposed to you the confirmation of the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held here at the Parliament building here at Mount Weldale in St. George's on Thursday, the 6th of November. Be read. All those in favor, say aye. Oh, I'm jumping the gun here. Honorable Senator Adrian Thomas, Leader of Government Business. You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and pleasant morning to you and your staff, and pleasant good morning to my fellow senators. Madam President, I rise and I beg that the minutes of the proceedings of the sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Building, Mount Weldale, St. George, on Thursday, the 6th of November, 2025, be taken as read.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable members, the question is that the confirmation of the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Building here at Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Thursday, 6 November 2025, be taken as read. All those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Senator.
Madam President, I beg that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Building, Mount Weldale, St. George, on Thursday, the 6th of November, 2025, be confirmed.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable members, the question is that the confirmation of the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Parliament Building here at Mount Weldale, St. George's on 6th November 2025 be confirmed. All those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay. Minutes are confirmed.
Item number 7, petitions. Item number 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees. Item number 9, ministerial statements. Item number 10, government notices. Item number 11, unofficial notices. Item number 12, questions. Item number 13, personal explanations. Item number 14, motions.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Whereas debates on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial state opening of the 4th session of the 11th Parliament on Friday, the 12th of September 2025, was deferred to a date to be announced. Be it resolved that the said address be further deferred to a date to be announced.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable members, the question is that whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial state opening of the 4th session of the 11th Parliament, done on Friday, 12th September 2025, be deferred to a date to be announced. All those in favor say aye, and the opposing view say nay. Ayes have it.
Item number 15, bills.
Honorable Senator Adrian Thomas, Leader of Government Business. You have the floor, Senator.
Madam President, I beg to introduce for the first reading a bill shortly entitled Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025.
A bill which seeks to amend the Fisheries Act, Cap 108 of the Principal Act, to enhance the regulation of the treatment of marine mammals within the waters of the state of Grenada, shortly entitled Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025.
Honorable Senator Adrian Thomas, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the Senate be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all the stages at this sitting.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing order of the Senate be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. All those who are so persuaded say aye, and of the contrary opinion say nay. Agreed. Honorable Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move that the second reading of the bill be taken at this time.
Thank you, honorable members. The question is that the second reading of the bill be done at this time. Honorable Senator.
Madam President, today we are here to debate a very important bill that speaks not only to the environmental responsibility that we have as a nation, but very importantly also our economy, our economic survival. And we also have a global responsibility in regards to our credibility on the global market. Madam President, somewhere around late August, early September 2024, the United States of America, through its National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, better known as NOAA, issued a license, issued a notice, denying Grenada what is known as comparability finding. It's a term that many of us may not be aware of in Grenada. But basically, Madam President, in layman's term, this means the U.S. has concluded that Grenada laws do not provide adequate protection for marine mammals in our fisheries sector. I repeat that. In simple terms, it means that the U.S. has concluded that Grenada's laws do not provide adequate protection for marine mammals in our fisheries sector. Madam President, as a result of this, a ban on the importation of Grenadian fish and fish products into the United States is scheduled to be implemented on the 1st of January 2026. Madam President, in a nutshell, our fish and fish products can only be imported into the United States if our country has received a positive comparability finding. Madam President, the core requirement is that Grenada must demonstrate our regulatory program for marine biology protection. We must put systems in place. And that must be comparable in effectiveness to the US program if we want to capitalize on the US market. Madam President, this issue is calling on our country to either prohibit the intentional killing or serious injury of marine mammals during fishing operations, or have reliable certification procedures proving that exported products were not sourced from elsewhere and other practices. Madam President, Grenada as a nation depends heavily on the fishing sector. For employment, export earnings, food security, rural development. Madam President, this is no small matter. And therefore, as a nation, we ought to take it serious, because I see it as a serious threat to our livelihood. But apart from that, Madam Speaker, Madam President, it is also a wake-up call. It is also a call for us to strengthen our legislation, modernize our systems, and most of all, Madam President, the time has come for we to start thinking about broadening our market, alternative. Madam President, it's a golden opportunity for we to rise to the occasion, and move up to international standards. And in this day and age, wherever you go, whichever part of the world you go, the slogan is sustainability. And this is an industry that has served us for many centuries. Fishing is not happening today in Grenada. Fishing has always been there. But Madam President, we take it for granted. And we believe that things are going to remain as is forever. It doesn't work like that. And so, Madam President, the main purpose of this bill is very clear: to update Grenada's fishery legislation so that it meets international standards for the protection of marine mammals, and to prevent a potential ban that is carded for 1st of January 2026 on the export of fish and fish products to the United States. Madam President, the United States is one of Grenada's most lucrative markets, especially, and my good friend Senator Nolan Cox will tell you what the exporting of tuna, yellowfin tuna, means to our brothers and sisters in Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and Grenada also. Madam President, hundreds of fisher folk, processors, exporters, and their families will be affected by this potential ban. Madam President, as I said before, this bill is a serious matter of national economic interest, environmental responsibility, and global credibility. The need for legislative action is what the demand is. And this administration, this government, Madam President, feel that it has a responsibility to respond in the interests of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Madam President, without these corrective measures, without doing anything about this matter at this point in time, we could lose access to our biggest market at this point in time until we find others. Madam President, to do nothing about it, Grenada can face serious economic fallout in the rural communities, an economy we are trying to build. Madam President, without taking corrective actions, we could either suffer some level of reputational damage internationally, and therefore, this bill is urgent, this bill is essential, and this bill, Madam President, when passed here today, will restore some level of confidence in the architects of this very important industry. But, Madam President, I would like to spend a couple of minutes on the economy, the economic impact on national interests. The fisheries sector, Madam President, has provided hundreds of jobs, millions in export earnings, and obviously foreign exchange is always great. Figures coming out of the Ministry of Fisheries indicates that fish production in 2024, the record is there of 5.3 million pounds, value at 42.35 million EC dollars. $42.35 million, Madam President, EC dollars. Fish exported in 2024 shows a figure of 1.5 million pounds, valued at 18.5 million EC dollars. I pause because I think we need to digest those figures. The number of fishing vessels registered with the ministry today, 990 vessels. If you put a value to that, you can see the level of investment. Our Grenadian citizens, not the government, the citizens invest in this industry. The number of fishers registered today, 4,000 fisher folk. And they provide an employment of over 4,500 persons. Madam President, I was also privileged to get the figure that over 500 million EC dollars is what the total investment in this very important industry means, Madam President. So failure to do nothing about the matter put all these resources and all these activities at risk. I believe that passing this bill, Madam President, Grenada will show some level of commitment to this very important industry and how responsible this government is. And so, Madam President, with all this background, we have brought this very important bill to the House, to the Senate. And this bill, Madam President, Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025, seeks to amend the Fisheries Act, Cap 108, as the principal act, to enhance the regulation of the treatment of marine mammals within the waters of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Madam President, this bill contains 4 clauses. Number 1 provides for the short title of the bill. Clause 2, Madam President, provides for an amendment to Section 2 of the Principal Act to expand the definition of fish and also to insert 2 new definitions, observer and marine mammal. Madam President, Part 3 of the Principal Act, while it expounds on the marine protected areas and conservation measures, there are provisions in this section, in this part of the Principal Act, that takes care of fishing priority areas, marine protected areas, permission to undertake fisheries research, listing of land for aquaculture, prohibited fishing methods, unlawful use and possession of fishing gear. Madam President, the Principal Act, those are some of the areas that it takes care of. But there are no provisions in the Principal Act for protecting marine mammals. And therefore, Clause 2 will take care of the inserting marine mammals. Madam President, these changes will now align the Act with international standards and provide clarity for our regulations. Because if we don't pass this Act, we cannot have regulations. The minister will not be able to pass regulations in regards to marine mammals. Clause 3, Madam President, provides for the insertion of a new section, Section 28A of the Principal Act, to establish the observer and monitoring system to improve the administration of the Principal Act. Madam President, this new section, Section 28A, which deals with observer and monitoring system, Madam President, will create the statutory basis for a national observers program. And this program, Madam President, is so important. The observer, when appointed, will be able to monitor fishing activities and record activities, incidental interactions with marine mammals, and capture very important data. Madam President, this will also verify compliance with the regulation. If you have regulations and you don't have observers and you don't have a monitoring system, then it may not worth the while. Madam President, under this section, marine mammals Madam President, the chief, under this section, Section 28A, the chief fisheries officer, I'm reading from the amendment Madam President has presented to the House, shall establish, plan and manage an observer and monitoring programs for the purpose of collecting and reporting reliable and accurate information for scientific management and compliance purpose under the Act. Section 28, subsection 2. For the purpose of this section, an observer shall exercise scientific monitoring and any other relevant function that may be on a fishing vessel or facility related to fisheries that has been granted a license, permit, or authorization under the Act. Madam President, subsection 3. A person who desires to be certified as an observer may apply in writing and any relevant functions that may be on a, I will take over subsection 3, Madam President. A person who desires to be certified as an observer may apply in writing to the Chief Fisheries Officer, demonstrating that he or she has acquired training as a fisheries biological technician, including skills in gathering data on the fish that is caught or discarded by a commercial fishing vessel. And there are 3 other subsections, Madam President, that is so very important that we didn't have in our system, and now we will have them. Madam President, the last clause, clause 4, provides for the amendment of section 40 of the Principal Act. Madam President, this clause will be inserted as clause 4A and 4B. So a new subsection, Madam President, will be inserted under the provisions 40 in the Principal Act. And basically, Madam President, it takes care for the regulatory powers, which will be, although the Principal Act gives the minister so much power already, but there is no power to make regulation regarding the protection of marine mammals. Madam President, subsection 4B will now take care for allowing the creation of offenses with penalty up to $100,000 or 12 months in prison. If you're making regulations, Madam President, and you don't have penalty with it, then nobody will feel that you're serious. So, Madam President, this important clause must be registered in this piece of legislation. As I speak, Madam President, of the 4 clauses, the Ministry of Fisheries is also they almost completed the draft regulations which will seek to prohibit intentional taking or injuring of marine mammals and contain other measures, including mandate that the Chief Fisheries Officer prepare a marine management plan which measures to guide commercial fishing in a manner that protects marine mammals. The anticipated enactment, Madam President, of the bill and the regulations is intended to enable Grenada to reapply to NOAA for the lifting of the potential ban come the 1st of January 2026. In conclusion, Madam President, this bill, again, is not about bureaucracy. It's not about making things difficult for our farmers. It is about protecting the livelihood of this very important nation, our people. It is about protecting our environment. If we don't have closed seasons for some of our animal species in Grenada, they might be wiped out by now. And we also have a responsibility, Madam President, for keeping Grenada on the competitive market. I believe that the passage of this bill is practical, it's necessary, and it's urgent. And I therefore urge every member of this House to debate this bill, discuss this bill, and ultimately let us pass this bill in the interests of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. I now commend this bill to this honorable House. Thank you.
I thank the Leader of Government Business in the Senate for presentation of this bill. The debate is open, gentlemen and ladies. From the Fishing constituency, the Senator Nolan Cox of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Senator Cox, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, when you said fishing constituency, I saw Senator Queen's Britain watch me in a kind of way, you know. So I caution Madam President, you know.
Yes, and I take the caution and,
Yes.
and withdraw constituency. And the other C, fishing community.
Madam President, I think it's important and appropriate that I must commence my contribution to this bill by saying that I'm in support of this bill. This bill really underscores a national issue that we have before us, that we're trying to address. It's a bill that will have significant impact on livelihoods, while the Leader of Government Business did speak a lot about the macroeconomic impacts. They are going to have some significant microeconomic impacts on rural communities and families. And I think that is something that we must pay attention to as well. Madam President, this bill, I think it's an important first step for us to address all the necessary requirements for us to get back to where we ought to be. Madam President, the presenter of the bill spoke about the issue of the comparability findings. I think it's important to just simplify for persons to understand, because a lot of this has created some confusion out in the community, persons having different understanding, different interpretations of what is before us. And basically, it's in a simple way. What the US government is saying is that if you want to export seafood or fish products to us, your fishermen have to abide by the same laws that our fishermen have to abide by. Basically, that is what they're saying. And if your fishermen, meaning Grenada's fishermen,
Fisher people. There are men and women in fishing in Grenada.
but Madam President, you're forcing me to go biblical, because when the Bible speaks about men, it means both men and women. But nonetheless, Madam President, I mean no intention to in any way to discredit the work that women do in the fishing sector. But I think everybody understands the context in which we speak and this is presented. So, Madam President, for some comfort for the House, fisher folks or persons involved in the fishing sector, I didn't realize I was so
Going to
popular.
teaching.
Madam President, it's something that we have to pay attention to. Basically, what they're saying is that we need to be up to speed And I think in retrospect, it creates some level of fairness for the sector to say if you want to participate in the sector, you have to abide by the laws that our persons who are involved in fishing for their livelihood do. So I think that is what is before us. So in simple terms, that is what they're asking us to do. But Madam President, as you know, in the scope of things and where we are in terms of the growth and development of our fishing sector, changes continue to take place over time, and those requirements continue to move, and it forces us as a country to make adjustments. If you recall, Madam President, it's only a few years ago we actually started the whole issue of longline fishing. And it's basically a new technology in a sense. And while Grenada's fisheries is much more modern than other some of our sister islands, like St. Vincent and the other countries, it shows that we still have a long way to go. Basically, Madam President, what is before us is much more than this bill today. What is before us is much more than the regulations that are going to be developed as a result of this bill. And I think it's important for us to bring those to bear. I think it's important. Madam President, when the leader of government business, the presenter of the bill, spoke about the observer and the monitoring, it is a lot more complex than just what is contained in front of us. It basically means, Madam President, our fishing gears will have to change, meaning that what we normally use, a particular type of hook that will normally maybe take up a mammal, marine mammal, while we hunting for tuna, which is the prize catch, it means now that that fishing gear will have to change. I know some of the vessels already comply. In terms of the hooks will have to change to minimize the impact. So if you were to catch a mammal, it could be easily released and go back. It also means, Madam President, that there will have to be some form of monitoring while the fishing process is taking place. So there is a strong likelihood that the boats will have to be equipped with special cameras to monitor the fishing. It also means that the observer may from time to time will have to go out at sea with one or two of the boats to monitor and to take information. It also means that vessels will have to be monitored as to where they are fishing, where they are getting their catch, Madam President. So all these, while not contained in this bill, is what our fishing community will have to deal with going forward, Madam President. I think it's important to underscore that. And the reason why, Madam President, I'm saying this is because from my interaction with persons involved in the fishing sector, there is a lot of uncertainty. And it's important that we bring some clarity to this so that persons know what to expect, what is expected of them. I think, Madam President, there's a great opportunity for the government to also engage in getting our fishing community in terms of readiness from a mental standpoint, understanding what is before us and the importance of it. You know, sometimes, if we do not do that, if we don't prepare them, when we implement, we start to have challenges. We start to have breaches. So I think that there is a serious need for some issue of training in terms of persons' readiness to deal with the whole issue of compliance. Because if that is not done successfully, I'm afraid that we would not be able to achieve what we're seeking to do. As I said, this bill is a first and necessary and important step, and we are very happy that we are doing this today. But there is much more we have to get done. Madam President, mention was made of opportunities for alternative markets. I still think, yes, that is a viable concern, and that has always been a concern, not just in the fishing sector, but also in every sector. But without saying that, Madam President, whether we look for alternative markets, the whole issue of compliance, the whole issue of standards is one that is ever present in the space right now in which countries trade. So what we're doing will only help for us to find better markets. We already have a compliance clearance to ship to the European Union, which is good. And so if we get ourselves back in line for the United States to achieve that compliance, it will only add more asset for us to look for alternative markets. So I do agree, Madam President, there's a great opportunity for that. Madam President, there's another thing I really want to underscore, and I think it's very important for us to underscore this, and I'll speak about the microeconomic impacts. What does this mean for us? And maybe, Madam President, the mover of the bill, on several occasions, he indicated a potential ban. And I would like some clarity. I think it's important. And the question is, does it mean by us passing this bill, does it mean that it is okay for us to export on or before January 1st? Does it mean that the ban will have to go into effect? And do we have to apply then to get compliance? I think it's important for us to understand that. And not just for us here, but also for the fishing community. It's important and it's fair for them to know what to expect. And the reason why I'm saying this, Madam President, is because of the persons who are going to be impacted. They need to know how to prepare and for how long to prepare. And let's just put it in context that one of the persons who may own a fishing vessel may well have a mortgage for that vessel and may have other financial commitments. The question is, if they are now unable to export fish come January 1st, what happens for them? And that is the question they're asking themselves. What do we do? How long can I hold out? How long can my reserves support myself and my family or my business until we get this? I think it's important, Madam President, that some clarity, some conservative time frame be looked at in terms of achieving to bring some comfort to persons who are going to be directly impacted by this. So while, yes, the economy, we are going to lose the potential to lose millions of dollars on an annual basis, I still think it is far more grievous if families who are directly involved in the sector. The question is, Madam President, there might be some persons who may, if this ban go into effect, I don't know, as Liam said, potential. Some persons may get out of this, the sector altogether. Some persons may not. One of the things that we observe is that when you have these things, these issues, persons are unable to come back into the sector after for obvious reasons. When you have, for example, a hurricane, some businesses don't come back. And this in itself is a significant impact on the businesses of persons involved in this. So I am saying this, that we are very happy that this is a first and important step, but I think that there is a clear opportunity for much more to be done in terms of readiness by the persons who are directly involved in the sector. And I'm saying this because of the interactions that I've been having with persons asking questions. Some of the questions I cannot answer. I could only give a conservative response, but I cannot answer because the question is, are we going to see a ban come January? And that is the question. And if so, how long do we anticipate that is going to be in place based on what we have to do, based on the steps, based on the procedures that we have to do to actually remove it and to get the clearance? What is going to happen? I think it's important and fair. There's some fairness for the persons involved in the sector to know what is happening, Madam President. I think that, for me, is the core of where we are today. And I am quite certain that the fishermen are very happy to hear that the government and, of course, the parliament were here passing this bill. But I'm quite certain that they are far more concerned with what is going to happen. And I think that is something for the government of the and the Ministry of Fisheries to really ponder on. So, Madam President, with these few contributions, I really want to again express my support for this bill, but to say that this, we appreciate and, of course, welcome this initial step, but I think the greater part of the work is yet to be done. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank you, Senator Cox, on many levels, including fisherfolk. And I take it that the question you've posed have been heard by the presenter, and in the course of time, during this debate, I'm sure a reply is forthcoming, so fear not. I offer the floor to the gracious senator from, well, I say you are from St. Patrick. I don't know where in Grenada you reside, but I go to your roots. Senator Seville Francis, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Madam President. And allow me to say a special good morning to everyone in this honorable house today, Madam President, and a special good morning to our fisher folks throughout our Tri-Island state. Madam President, I must, before I proceed with my presentation, thank the Honorable Nolan Cox for his contribution and the recommendations that he provided. Madam President, I think it is fair, I think it is just, and I think the right questions are being asked. But I have one response to that, and it is, as he rightfully articulated, it's a process. It's a step in the right direction. And so after this amendment to this bill, we will do, and I know that our Honorable Minister with responsibility for the fishing industry has been working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that this ban does not come into full effect. So we can rest assured that what needs to be done is being done to ensure that there aren't greater penalties for the lack thereof to this amendment, Madam President. Madam President, this amendment to us, or this amendment before us this morning, may come at a time what I would consider to be unfortunate. But as I often say, there is no better time than the present to make amends for what no longer serves the development of our people. Madam President, this bill, the Fisheries Amendment Bill of 2025, seeks to strengthen an existing framework that serves for the protection and management of our marine life, but particularly, Madam President, our marine mammals, while ensuring that we strike that balance between the livelihood of our fisher folk and the sustainability of our ecosystem. Madam President, before I proceed further, I also wish to pause to recognize the tremendous contributions that our fisher folks make to our beloved island, Madam President. Madam President, allow me to speak directly to our fishermen and our fisherwomen, the heartbeat of our coastal communities. I know that this conversation and the uncertainty surrounding possible restrictions has caused anxiety and unrest. And I hear it, and I've seen it, Madam President. And I sat here this morning and I started drafting an apology on behalf of those of us who are serving the fisher folk of our nation, Madam President. The fear that your way of life might have been disrupted is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. I offer a sincere apology to those who may have felt the emotional weight of this process. You should not have had to endure that distress, but please be rest assured that we are here today precisely because we are working assiduously to fix it. We are not here to penalize our fisher folks. We are here to protect them by ensuring that Grenada's fishing industry continues to thrive legally, more importantly, sustainably and competitively, both now and in the decades ahead. Madam President, fishing in Grenada is more than an occupation. It is a heritage, Madam President, because we have generation of fisher folks, and I see it's a business that would never go out of style, Madam President. It's not one that AI can take over just like that. It is one that is needed and forever will remain, Madam President. It feeds our nation, it sustains our families, and it contributes meaningfully to our economy and GDP. And I think the Honorable Leader of Government Business, in his statistics, has shown how lucrative and credible this industry is. In many communities, the ocean is both a pantry and a paycheck. Madam President, but we must also recognize that the ocean is not an infinite source. Sustainability is now the most valuable currency in the global fisheries industry. Countries that demonstrate responsible fishing practices and strong conservation standards are the ones that will continue to access lucrative export markets and international support. And Madam President, I would love for our beloved Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique, to be part of the statistics that shows that we have a lucrative export market and international support. Madam President, the modernization of our approach through this amendment introduces a system for scientific observation and monitoring. And essentially what we're saying is, going forward, we should not have to guess how our fishing industry is contributing, Madam President. What we're doing through this modernization is also empowering trained observers to collect real-time data, and we know that data is one of the things, and statistics we cry over and over because we cannot find statistics to help us to form policy or legislation, Madam President, that best serves our people. So this modernization will help us to do just that, to collect the real-time data on marine activity, the fish catches, and the marine mammal interactions. And I can see, Madam President, how something like that can go beyond just the surface of what it is intended to do. This is not just about us creating policy or the policy directives, but I see it as a partnership, Madam President. I see this as a partnership between science and the industry, Madam President. I see this as a partnership between the fisher folk and the government. Madam President, I see this as a sure way to ensure that the decisions we make about the sea are guided by data and not guesswork. Because we often think that the sea is an infinite source. Right? Madam President, by recognizing marine mammals under the Act, we are aligning Grenada with international conservation efforts and standards, and giving our minister, whomever it may be in charge, to have that authority to regulate and protect our marine life and maintain balance in the sector. Madam President, you know, oftentimes we say that our fisher folks makes a lot of money, but sometimes we can't see it, right? Again, because we think that it's an infinite source. But Madam President, I think by modernizing this approach, we're also going to be teaching our fisher folks how to see and to value the industry that they are a part of. And as also articulated by our Leader of Government Business, it gives us an opportunity to expand our horizon and not just to look for one specific area or region for export, but to see, I think this opportunity really took us out of the comfort box that we're in to now see how further we can expand, to see where else we can export. And the conversations that came up because of that, I think it was really overdue. And although it came at an unfortunate time, I think it is best that it started at some point rather than never being started at all. Madam President, the penalties that are outlined in the amendment, they are not meant to punish anyone indiscriminately, Madam President, but what it seeks to do is to uphold accountability and safeguard the sustainability of all of our resources. Madam President, in essence, this bill is about balance. Balance between protection and prosperity, between conservation and continuation, Madam President. And it reflects that our government is willing to listen, to act, and to course correct when necessary. And so while this amendment, Madam President, may have arisen from challenging circumstances, it presents us with an opportunity to lead differently, to make policy not just out of reaction, but with reflection and reform, more importantly. Madam President, in closing, I lend my support fully to this bill, not only because it is a correction in a gap in our legislation, but it's because it demonstrates compassion and care for those who depend on the sea for survival. May this amendment mark a renewed chapter in our fisheries sector, Madam President, one where our fishers are empowered, our oceans are respected, and our children inherit both an economy and an environment that are thriving. Madam President, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sybil Francis. Thank you very much. Senator Adrian Thomas, you have the floor, Senator. You'll wait a bit. Oh, your error. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Monty Andre Lewis. You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I too wish to stand in support of this bill for a number of the reasons so profoundly advanced by Senator Nolan Cox, leader of government business, and to some extent as advanced by Senator Francis. I too would like some specific answers as to the issue of whether this ban will be coming into effect, whether or not we have an opportunity now to prevent this ban, because I heard the use of the term potential. And why am I belaboring this? Because our fisher folks need to have certainty. Because this is not a simple matter. This is a matter that impacts their livelihood and impacts the community, because it extends beyond just the fisher folks. It extends to their families, it extends to businesses, it extends to the whole nation. And therefore, even in the midst of crisis, in facing crises, when you have concrete information, it allows you to be better prepared to be able to handle these issues. So it is important to know that. Also, it is important for us to know that if the answer to the question is that we are not yet in a position, and we will not be in a position, to prevent the ban from coming into effect from January 1st, 2026, give us a time frame as to when we see that based on all that we have to do, to be able to give some idea as to when these things are possible. Because we will expect that while we work within these halls to get in necessary legislative processes in place, there will be what we call behind the scene or outside this place discussion, diplomatic discussions taking place so that we can give an idea to the U.S., we are speaking of the U.S. in particular, yes, as to what we are doing and trying to soften the ground as much as possible so that we can know that once we do A, B, C, D, we can get this ban, if it comes into effect, lifted by February, March, something that allows us to be able to work towards this. I know it is said that this ban presents a potential ban, presents an opportunity for us to do things better, to do things that we ought to have been doing, but it is rather unfortunate. Because the aspect of alternative markets ought not to be driven by what we are facing now. The aspect that Senator Cox addressed, and it is not just the fishing industry. We are dealing specifically with the fishing industry, but I hope that we are not reactive to looking for better ways and means of advancing nationally and locally issues that we deal with every day, given the importance of the fishing industry to us. What I am not also clear on is whether or not the standards that we are now putting into legislations to demonstrate to the rest of the world and to the U.S. that we have legislations in place. Because my understanding, even based on a contribution from the leader of government business, is that most of the practices that we are involved in, we may not be directly involved in a number of the things here that we have to put in legislations to avoid, but we need to demonstrate that we have those legislations. So my question is whether or not the standards that we are putting in the legislations and will come up through regulations, is it to every single fisher folk? So whether or not you have a boat that is 15 feet, right? Whether or not how far you go out, yes? And the monitoring and everything, the equipping of the boat and everything have to be acquired. So be it whether or not you are in Mackay or in St. Mark or Gove or Kitimatic, and understanding that Kitimatic and Carriacou are more involved in what we call a long line fishing, yes? Whether or not every single person who is involved in fishing, regardless of the scale, large scale or small scale, has to meet or has to be guided by those regulations. That would be important for myself too, because people will be asking, because we speak about those things inside here. Yes? A point raised by Senator Cox that I wish to go a bit deeper into. We must admit, he didn't make that point. I'm making that point and then to piggyback on some of the things that he raised. I think we all could agree and must admit that the ban that we are facing was not brought upon us by the fisher folks. But yes, but they are the ones who will be most directly impacted and the nation on a whole. And therefore, because it was not brought about by some fault of theirs as something that they did not do, what systems are we putting in place, or what discussions are we having in place to have a discussion with them as to see how they'll be impacted and what system can be put in place to assist them? Okay, we are speaking about rural family. We are speaking about people who may be impacted with their education, their schooling, just as how the rural economy and the collapse of the agriculture has impacted many of the rural colleagues at all levels, recognizing that agriculture, coconut milk, banana were used to send many of us to school. And with the collapse of that industry, how it has impacted with the urban drift, with the drift from the rural economy, from the rural area, down to the south in particular, if one may say, and the impact that that has had. And we need to, as of this moment, if we have not yet started to do it, seriously engage the community, the fishing community, and it therefore calls upon us as a state to be extremely more prudent in how we use whatever little resources that we have. So we have to prioritize where we spend our monies, what we spend our monies on. And this is not a case of speaking about handouts. This is not a case about speaking that people are dependent and looking towards government for help. But if we accept, as we must accept, that this challenges that is coming, and not is coming that is here, because psychologically one can also understand from now what the fisher folks and the wider community that depends on them would be going through. The aspect of uncertainty. Therefore, we have that duty, and I'm saying we collectively, as a state and as organizations, to understand that and the size of the fishing community, as the leader of government business spoke about, shows that it has serious potential for negative implication. I know resources are scarce, especially in this particular period, but we owe it to that community to give whatever assistance that can be given. And not from just being in terms of empathy. Because empathy will come in when one can also see that there is a contributing factor by he or she who is being impacted. But in this case, in my humble view, this was not brought upon the fisher folks because they went out there and they were reckless or careless. And I'm not saying that anyone is saying this, but I'm saying that that should serve as added incentive for us in terms of our duties and responsibility. I remain confident that we can address these matters because, as I've said, we have demonstrated over the past that when we are faced with challenges, we can take decisive actions. I remain convinced about that. Just in direct relation to the bill itself, Section 4, just a question. I think on amendments to Section 40, in Senator Francis' contribution, she may have provided an answer, but as much as I respect your views on matter, it would also be good for me to ask the question so that those who are more endowed than us can answer. Under the aspect of the fine, that's B, 4B, 4 to insert, there may be attached to regulations made under this section a fine of $100,000 or imprisonment for 12 months. So my question is whether or not it is a fixed 100,000 or it can vary, because it varies. So I accept that. Just been told it varies. And the aspect may here carries the weight of shall. I'm taking it, meaning that it is not optional. In other words, I am asking that may here, so in other words, it's not up to the minister to determine whether or not there will be a penalty. There will be a penalty, but it is up to, and you can be also imprisoned, right? So I'm taking that may here carries the weight of shall, that there will be penalties, because once you violate, one is expected that there will be some level of, one wouldn't want to say punishment, there will be some level of penalty to bring some level of enforcement. That, Madam President, is my contribution, and to extend labor solidarity to the fishing industry on this matter, and to repeat once again our support for the bill and solidarity. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank you, Senator Lewis, and the floor is offered to Senator David Andrew. Have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good morning to you. Good morning to all of my colleagues in the chamber, and to everyone following this broadcast through whatever platform or means you're doing this. This very important amendment today, the Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025. A bill that I would say, Madam President, is very timely, but very long overdue. I say very timely because it's time sensitive given the potential impact it could have on the Grenadian economy. But it's long overdue because this was first brought, the misalignment in legislation was first brought to the attention of the then Grenada government in 2018. And in 2025, of course, we received final notice that the actions were going to be taken because this was brought to the attention since 2018 and not addressed, as far as I understand. Madam President, quickly to answer a couple of the questions, because are we going to see a ban in January? The reality is there's no way we could give a concise answer. What we know is that it was brought to our attention, gaps were identified, and the government of Grenada is treating with the areas that it can treat with. That is why we are here. That is why we are making sure the legislation is aligned with the NOAA legislation to ensure that we are in compliance and that our fishermen and women, or fisherfolk, cannot be debarred the opportunity to ply their trade and export to the United States. Our agencies, in fact, Foreign Affairs, I'm aware that our ambassador in the United States, the Ministry of the Blue Economy, they're all in touch and engaging with NOAA so that we can have final updates as to what the timelines could be, if we'd have to reapply, but I know that process is ongoing. So as soon as we have that information, we'll be more than happy to make it available to the public. As it is, we do not yet have it, but I can tell you we are engaging in every process necessary to ensure that we have the best responses to reliably conform to our citizens. So the government is doing its part. Madam President, the question was asked, well, I think Senator Andre talked about, he referred to he made a statement that he hopes it's not a crisis that is driving the improvements and the response. Well, the truth is, we don't often have control over those situations when they come. But I think our response, there's one quote that says, life is 10% what happens and 90% how you respond to it. And so when these situations come about, sometimes we don't have control. But I think if we take a gauge on how responsibly and how responsibly the response comes, then we could be in a good place. And with every crisis, and I'm sure you know, my colleague, there is an opportunity for some gain, some benefit. We can go back in history and talk about several crises that probably presented themselves and the benefits that came out afterwards. But we don't need to go there. But I'm seeing and I'm seconding the statement by my colleague, Senator Francis, that suggested that out of this crisis, we have several potential opportunities. And the final thing I'll mention, I know that there has been and there is ongoing engagement of the fisher folk. even at the level of the cabinet, we had some of the major fisherfolk stakeholders engage with the cabinet, expressing how this is likely to impact them, so that we had a first-hand understanding of what this potential situation could result in for them, right? So we have been engaging, and I know there is continual engagement with the fisher community to ensure that we respond appropriately. Madam President, to the bill a little bit. So this bill seeks to create legislative alignment with Grenada's fisheries bills in respect to marine mammals and those of the United States. We have to accept the reality, Madam President, that Grenada was far behind, outside of the potential ban, and I'll address it from that area as well, but Grenada's legislation was far behind in treating with those marine mammals. Many of our marine mammals are endangered, and some of them critically so. And to have had legislation that doesn't expressly protect those endangered species is far less than ideal. And so this provides the opportunity to upgrade. It provides the opportunity to address a long outstanding issue of the protection of our marine mammals. And by extension, increase the sustainability of the fishing sector. Because if we indiscriminately treat with marine mammals, if we indiscriminately treat with the precious resources of the blue economy, the sustainability of that sector can be threatened. And so this legislation alignment seeks to support that. Madam President, I want us to recognize, so apart from treating with the endangered species, this is very timely because a potential ban to Grenada's fishing sector will have immensely great economic impact. I think lots of persons are echoing that. We know for a fact that fishing alone contributes, as far as the 2023 estimates indicated, approximately 1.3% of the gross domestic product of Grenada. And somebody might say, well, that's small. But that's thousands of families, individuals being positively impacted. This contributes approximately over $50 million to the sector, to the economy. And it has been consistent over decades, generally. Madam President, this does not even talk about the uncaptured elements and undertakings in the fishing sector that's not captured in a way that can be computed and calculated as a part of GDP. You have a lot of informal undertakings in the fishing sector that's not captured. And in fact, that's one of the things probably the minister in the other place for fisheries and agriculture needs to look into, so that we can more reliably capture those informal sectors in the fishing area, in the fishing division, that contribute to GDP. So I'm saying that the GDP could even be greater than what is really accounted for in these figures. And so lots of people will get affected. The legislation seeks to strengthen monitoring systems and improve reporting, and that is critical. And it might mean improving the equipment. And I was happy to hear in the other place the Minister for the Environment talk about efforts that they had undertaken to upgrade the gears for fisherfolk. I know there was training, for instance, organized by the Fisheries Department for young fishermen and sea captains. In fact, some of the fishermen from the electoral district that I reside in Subiz, benefited from that training. They personally mentioned so to me. And I know there was distribution of certain safety gear. So we're heading in the right direction. And I do agree with Senator Cox that there might be quite a bit more to do to strengthen the monitoring capabilities and the abilities of our fisher folk to remain safe and to be able to record the catches and all of those things that might be necessary to be in compliance with the legislation. Madam President, this legislation comes at a time when if we don't treat with it, we will not avert a potential ban. And we are confident that as we as a government responsibly continue to do what is required of us to align our legislation and to put all the structures in place for monitoring, for recording, and for being able to observe, to report appropriately, that we will eventually avert the consequences of that ban. But we are happy at this point that as a government we are doing what is required, and so I give my full unequivocal support to this bill, this amendment, as presented by the Leader of Government Business. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Andrew. Representative officials in the Senate, Senator, is it you? No, it's Senator, who's? Listen, people. Senator Rahman, representative for business in the Senate.
Thank you very much, Madam President. God willing, I will be brief. On behalf of the business sector, on behalf of business, I too stand to give support to this very important bill, this Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025.
And I know you will, pardon the interruption, I know you will do as you normally do speak on the bill.
I'll try to.
Give us a treaty.
So, Madam President, from a private sector standpoint, the U.S. market is the market. It is not the only market, and we know that diversification is important for every sector. But the fact is that it is our best market and has been a win-win for us all, for business, for fishermen, for the U.S. market. Madam President, lands and nations have clearly defined and observable boundaries, but oceans and seas do not. And by extension, sea mammals go wherever God Almighty wills for them to go. And this is why it is important to have one standard across the board as it relates to this issue. Madam President, as we understand it, suspension by NOAA is the result of years of failing to come up to speed and to meet the standards that have been required a long time ago. Madam President, as we also understand it, this ban takes effect January 1st, 2026. Madam President, what we are doing here today and what the task force and related ministries have been doing is to make sure that we are ready before that ban comes into effect. We heard this morning from the Leader of Government's Business that about 4,000 fisherfolk are self-employed directly in this industry. Madam President, that figure can be multiplied by at least 4 when you factor in their dependents, family members, and so forth. And that number can be further multiplied to our entire society, in short, everyone who consumes seafood. That is how important this sector is. Madam President, when we think about the economic impact and spin-off of spending within the local community, the fishing industry is critical to the local community, whether it is in Carriacou, Petit Martinique, Maki, Woban, Calice, Gouave, Victoria, Sautez. Critical to the local economy where spending is concerned. We therefore offer 2 suggestions for consideration. While government cannot subsidize every important industry, the question is, what is it that government can or is willing to do, let us say after 30 days or 60 days, God forbid, has elapsed, if it has not been resolved? that needs to be thought of, and that the recommendation is that the government needs to be prepared for different scenarios. And secondly, we understand that there will be a digital vessel monitoring system. So in addition to strengthening data collection, in light of the heavy military presence in our region, this digital system and this digital ID can be shared with the US military to remove or reduce any risk for our fishermen while out at sea. So they will know who we are, that we have our people out there, and so that they are not a target by any mistake. So I think that those two suggestions are what we would like to share this morning, and we fully support this bill and commend the government for the speedy work and hard work, the task force and so forth, with regard to this issue. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rahman. Senator Gloria Thomas, you have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Pleasant good morning to everyone in this honorable House. I stand to add my voice to the Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025 and to give my full support to the said bill. I believe that this bill is a very important bill for us here in this House and the country as a whole. Because this bill seeks to strengthen Grenada's fishery sector by improving sustainability, protecting marine life, and safeguarding international trade opportunities. Madam President, honorable members, today we are called upon to make a decision that will shape the future of Grenada's fisheries sector. A decision that will affect the livelihood of our people and the health of marine environment. The Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025 is not a technical adjustment. It is a safeguard for our economy, our sovereignty, and our responsibility to the future of this country, the future generations. Grenada fisheries are the lifeblood of thousands of families. They put food on our tables and income in our communities. Without this amendment, we risk losing access to vital export markets, especially in the USA. Honorable members, can we afford to jeopardize millions in trade revenue and the jobs that depend on us? That depends on it? This bill ensures compliance with international standards, keeping our doors open to global markets. Madam President, for too long, illegal and unreported fishing has undermined our sector. By establishing a formal observer system, we introduce transparency and oversight. Observers will monitor vessels, record practices, and ensure that Grenadian fisheries are beyond reproach. This is not bureaucracy. It is accountability. The amendment empowers the minister to regulate the protection of marine mammals. These creatures are not only part of our ecosystem, they are symbols of our natural heritage. Protecting them is a moral duty and a global expectation. With this bill, Grenada stands tall as a responsible steward of the ocean. Madam President, the world is watching. Our compliance with NOAA standards is not optional, it is essential. By passing this bill, Grenada demonstrates that we are serious about sustainable fisheries management. We strengthen our reputation, we attract investment, and we secure our place in the international negotiations. This amendment is about more than fishing. It is about jobs, it is about trade, it is about transparency, and our duty to protect the environment. It is about ensuring that Grenada's blue economy thrives in the decade to come. Madam President, I want to urge us to support this bill, because by aligning with the global sustainability standards, Grenada strengthens its reputation as a responsible fishing nation, which can attract investment and partnership in the blue economy. Madam President, let us not falter. Let us pass the Fisheries Amendment Act, Amendment Bill 2025, with conviction, with unity, and with pride. In short, the Fisheries Amendment Bill protects marine ecosystem, strengthens enforcement, ensure Grenada's compliance with international standards, and secure the economic future of its fishing industry. I now pledge my support to the bill again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Gloria Thomas. Is it Dr. Charles? I offer the floor to Dr. Mariana Charles. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and a pleasant good morning to my colleagues here today. I want to start, Madam President, by acknowledging that this Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025 is a necessary step, and I rise today in support of this bill. And I hope to see more for this crucial sector going forward. And, you know, this morning I stand with our fisher folks. I hail from St. Mark, you know, which fishing is a significant part of our communities. I stand with our vendors, our processors, and others in supporting any measure that strengthens the future of this sector and helps safeguard the livelihoods of thousands that depend on it. And by establishing a monitoring program and defining marine mammal in our law, the bill moves closer to the standards that is required. Now, as I support this bill, I want to raise an important observation. And that observation is that does the legislation before us fully address the main concerns raised by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA? The very concerns that have resulted in a potential ban that is carded for January 2026, as I understand it. The bill, based on my understanding, creates a framework for monitoring and data collection, but it doesn't appear in itself to include a clear prohibition on the intentional harming of marine mammals, which, based on my understanding, NOAA identified as a core gap in our existing legislation. And I just hope that my colleagues on the other side can provide clarity in this regard, or at least urgently attend to this matter in the regulations, considering the time constraint at this stage as they may have additional information on the accompanying regulations or measures intended to address this important requirement. Additionally, Madam President, I note that the bill places considerable authority in the hands of select individuals to develop and manage this monitoring system. While this is understandable, it is a complex, as Senator Cox would have highlighted, and costly process, and underscores the need for clear standards, accountability, and transparency for the administrators and executives so that both fisher folks and the wider public can have confidence in how these powers will be exercised, as well as how it will impact them. Because as it stands now, a lot of persons are still uncertain as to how this may impact them, their livelihoods, and their families. And in concluding my brief remarks, I just want to say that we must be certain that what we pass here today will truly meet the standard required to protect our fishing sector, which is a very important sector as highlighted by many of my colleagues. Now, my call is a constructive one, as our fisher folks cannot afford the uncertainty, because there is still some uncertainty looming out there, and it is our duty to ensure that every measure that we approve in this Honorable House provides clarity, first and foremost, compliance, and a clear pathway and timeline for the sector's stability and growth going forward. And with this, Madam President, I conclude my contribution and again to lend my support to this important bill. Thank you.
I thank you, Senator Charles. Thank you. And I offer the floor to Senator Claudette Joseph. Senator, you have the floor, madam.
No. Very short. Thank you, Madam President. I rise to present some remarks in this debate. And these remarks, Madam President, will be supportive of the bill before this Honorable House. Madam President, I note with approval the mic is not on. Sorry about it, Madam President. I was saying that I note with approval the contributions of all of the members of this Honorable House who have spoken or contributed so far. And I also note that everyone appreciates the significance of this matter and the urgency with which we must act so that the over 990 registered vessels, the owners and operators of over 990 registered fishing vessels are not adversely affected. And the over 4,000 registered fishers, and of course the leader of government business gave these statistics, but he didn't give statistics in relation to the ancillary persons, the person who benefit from the industry, the vendors, and of course the ultimate consumers. And the vendors in particular stand to be adversely affected in a serious way, which will trickle down in a negative way on our economy if we do not come up to standard as required by NOAA. Madam President, I note too that these matters, these requirements for us to update our legislation were communicated to our government as far back as 2015 or 2016. And so, collectively, we all must take responsibility for the inordinate delay in treating with this matter, and trust that this step that we are going to take today will aid in the avoidance of the ban, which is set to come into force on January 1 if these remedial matters are not in place. And updating the legislation, Madam President, is just one of the steps that we must take to avoid the ban coming into automatic effect. And Madam President, this is required legislatively because we have a Fisheries Act which is dated and has not been upgraded over time, even when we were encouraged to do so as far back as 2015. And so the Act goes back to 1986, and we will appreciate from a global standpoint matters of protecting the natural ecosystems, the oceans, and the creatures that form the ecosystem or that are part of the ecosystem. Those perhaps were not as prominently focused on back then as they are today. Those were not necessarily matters of international significance as they are today. And so, in a sense, we did not move with the times in keeping our legislation current. Hence, Madam President, we are now required to amend our legislation to make specific provisions for the protection of sea mammals. And those are listed in the legislation. And the regulations that will accompany the legislation and will come into force together with the legislation goes into some detail. The regulations are not before this Honorable House because they are not required to be before the Honorable House. But Madam President, I would just mention a few aspects of the regulations that I hope will answer some of the questions that are understandably posed by other members of this House who might not have had sight of the regulations. And so the regulations will, in Part 2, provide for the protection of marine mammals. And there will be provisions in there prohibiting the intentional taking or injuring of marine mammals. There will be regulations relating to the sale of marine mammals and the prohibition of such sale. There would be requirements in the regulations for marine mammals that are caught accidentally or entangled while fishing, requirements for them to be returned safely to the ocean. And of course, reporting requirements also accompany the return. So not just returning them, but sightings, accidental catching of the mammal and so is to be reported. So there is a whole section there treating with reporting of incidental catch and interactions with marine mammals. And the Fisheries Division, through the officer, may request of fishermen, for example, returning from fishing or farming, information relating to the proximity of a fishing vessel and any deployed fishing gear, the species observed is, if identifiable, the number of individuals for each species, the location where each species were observed, and the number of individuals at each location. So matters like these, Madam President, will allow for us not only to protect, but also to track and keep account of the populations of the populations and varieties of marine mammals in our space. So that's basically an upgrade in our legislation. And of course, the capacity for our fishers to do these things as now would be required by law will mean that they will have to get upgraded equipment, and even the fisheries division will have to also be upgraded in the equipment and the processes using more scientific methods. So that's why I say what we are doing here today is only one aspect of the steps we must take in order to come into compliance with the NOAA requirements and to allow for our people, the fishermen, the vendors, the exporters, everybody who's affected, to allow for them to avert this automatic ban. And we have been working overtime, Madam President, because as we worked on these regulations and on the amendment to the legislation, the team at the Blue Economy, they have been, and it has been across ministries, all the relevant ministries coming together, and they have been working assiduously to ensure that not only this requirement is met, but all the other requirements in terms of acquiring and being conversant with the equipment and new processes that are required. So we want to assure the nation, we want to assure the people in this industry that we understand the gravity of the situation, and we understand how severe the impact will be if the ban comes into effect. And we are doing all in our power to ensure that that does not happen. We recognize the over $500 million that represent investment, annual investment in the fishing sector. And so we don't take that lightly. So we want to assure our people that we are doing our best and all within our power to make sure that we avert this ban. And so, Madam President, I thank my colleagues in this honorable House, representing a cross-section of our people, who have all supported this bill today. This is what we need to have more of, working together, supporting bills that come before this honorable House that will directly impact our people and improve their lives. So I commend wholeheartedly, Madam President, this bill to this honorable House. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Joseph. Thank you. Senator Dwight Horsford, you have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I offer my compliments of the season to your good self, the staff, and my colleagues in this chamber. Madam President, I rise to lend my voice to the chorus of support for this amendment initiative to the Fisheries Act. I think it is undoubted that it is of critical importance, particularly at this time, with a looming ban upon us, and certainly as many of our fisher folk already find it very difficult to make a dollar in the present environment. Madam President, this particular chamber and consistent with its historic reputation and its purpose is a place of sobriety. And I think continuing with that high tradition, I must make very brief observations in relation to this bill and the commentary of my distinguished colleagues in what will shortly follow. Madam President, the urgency for this enactment, I think, is well known, and we must put it in proper context. When one is in leadership, responsibility is yours, and it must be undertaken in a mature fashion. I mean, there will be an opportunity for dissembling remarks and political jabs in another place and at another time. But certainly, so far as the very critical nature of this bill is concerned, for the lives of fisher folk, I have just a small difficulty with certain dissembling remarks. So we must, as I said, put them in context. What is the context? I heard from my friends opposite that this requirement was upon a former government since 2015. One said 2015, one said 2018. What is the situation? The NOAA requirements existed in 2015 but were not enforced by the United States in 2015. The requirement for the protection of mammalian marine life began active enforcement by the United States in about 2018 when the notice was received in Grenada around that time. Extension was given, of course, for compliance because of the COVID-19 experience, the ubiquitous COVID-19 pandemic. And the extension period was between 2022 and 2025. 2020, a small partner, I know. That's why I said quietly, 2022 and 2025. And so we are undertaking it now. Of course, we have to, and we support it. The assessments haven't been done. But this issue is more about our fisher folk than any petty political job. That's the real issue here. Because as my distinguished friends, particularly my senatorial companion to the left, an extreme right and even leader of government business articulated, it is of critical importance to the fisher folk because they are the ones who feel it. They are the ones who are feeling it now, Madam President. And so let us, hopefully because of the Christmas, to have sober perspectives about what we are undertaking in the people's name. So we support it, but the context must be clearly understood. There is another important aspect, Madam President. My distinguished friend to the right pointed out something very crucial. It's not just crucial to enforcement of regulations that are being contemplated now, but vital to sustainability of the conservation area and conservation mammalian species. And what is that? That is prohibition, effective prohibition. Now, my learned and distinguished friend, the Attorney General, in her contribution, which I am pleased to hear, and much of it certainly rings well with me, Madam President, because what she describes is going to be contained in the regulations, I think will move things along a little bit more seriously. But I think what my distinguished friend, Senator Charles, indicated must not be glossed over, because it is all well and good to have a mechanism for addressing the reporting of incidents, but there must be strong enforcement in relation to prohibition. I understand the technological intervention of a monitoring system will assist that. But I think some sober and very profound consideration, there must be pause to consider what my friend has raised here in relation to the prevention approach or the prohibition approach to our regulatory design. And so, Madam President, with these humble few contributions I wish to leave at the table here, my support for the passage of this bill, and I thank you and my colleagues also for allowing me the opportunity to offer these remarks.
And I thank you, Senator Horsford, I thank you. And I offer the floor to our final first-time contributor,
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Roderick Sinclair. Not inviting a second round.
Thank you, Madam President. And as I rise, I want to, of course, give greetings to yourself, the staff, of course, all members of this chamber on both sides of the chamber, of course, our listening public, and most importantly, why we come here today. $500 million investment in the industry, and we come here to discuss only one bill. And that alone we come here to discuss. At least the fishermen may want to say, as the Calypso singer says, put some respect to the name. And I think that is what's happening today, that only one bill to discuss them matter only. And I trust that they are following and listening anxiously on this matter. Madam President, I've been trying to figure out where to start, because I was almost looked upon to speak second on this side, and then I realized the rest of the members did do justice in their contributions, and I appreciated that, to leave me in this moment to speak in this regard. I thank you for that honor.
So, Senator, you may want to figure out where to end.
Yeah. So, this is a serious matter, Madam President. Of course, when this matter came to light, I was called by about 2 media houses. Senator, we wanted to speak on this. I said, well, what is this about? And then I myself even reflect and say, I should have myself been also monitoring this myself as person in the sector. But sometimes those things happen too, not only in the government, as an individual. And even the fisher folks themselves may not even be aware. And they say, well, they need to organize so they could monitor what's going on and be independent, and they must manage the business. And there ain't nobody saying that today. If they want to manage the business, they have to know about those things. So, when I was called, I said, well, do you know what is this subject? No, Grenada, the fishermen, they ban, they can export. I said, but you can't do a news item like that. So I went and do my research. And quickly, I started discovering what was happening, and I actually shared some of the information with the news entities, and I trust that they would have used it wisely. I didn't speak on the matter. until the government spoke, because I thought it was a national issue, that they need to speak and say what they know, because I don't know what they know. It's just coming to light now, a lot of things that they know that we didn't know. Since 2018, since 2015, information is coming out. What I discovered, though, Madam President, through my research on Google, is that sometime in 2008, there was a petition, the same petition that is on our other paper, but in Grenada, we don't know how to petition. We only go on the TV and radio and making noise. The parliamentary process caters for that. And there was a petition in 2008, Madam President, if you permit me. And this was submitted to the Homeland Security, right? From the Center of Biological Diversity and the Turtle Island Restoration Network, big conservation groups, thousands of members. They petitioned the government sometime around the 5th of March 2008. And it was very clear, if I may just read an excerpt, Madam President, of the specific petition in what it says. Because this is why we're here today. If this petition was not put forward, and if the members of the Congress and the Senate in those different areas in the U.S. didn't pay heed to that and listen to the citizens, we would not have been here today. The question is, what is our citizens doing? What are we doing about a lot of issues that are confronting us today, that we just remaining silent and only talking on the radio? So I want to also use this opportunity, Madam President, as an opportunity for learning how the governance system works or the legislature work, and give persons the opportunity to understand that they do have a voice. Everything don't have to go in the courthouse. Some of the stuff could come right inside here where we could deal with it. Because when it's in the courthouse, it's still not sustainable. They go to the Attorney General and Lord Dwight Hartford to tell you that. 10 years after, things could be repealed, modified due to new ideas that justices would use in the process of judgment. So, it says, Madam President, the Center for Biological Diversity and Turtle Island Restoration Network are writing to request that the Secretaries of Homeland Security, the Treasury, and Commerce carry out a non-discretionary duty imposed by Section 101, bracket A and bracket B, of the Marine Mammals Protection Act, MMPA 16th USC 137A2. Here comes the narrative. To ban the importation of commercial fish or fish products that have been caught with commercial fishing technology, which results in incidental kills or incidental serious injury of marine mammals in excess of the United States standards. What is this standard? I haven't heard what the US standard is up to now. Is it 40? Is it 50? Is it 3 per million? I haven't heard that up to now, but we are approving a bill. The question is, you need to know the standard? But I'm not going there yet. Contrary to MMPA requirement, the secretaries have failed. So the people, this conservation group are saying and putting it to the secretaries. And it's a whole long document because they have all the scientific studies to show, have failed to obtain reasonable proof from countries exporting swordfish products to the U.S. regarding the effects of the commercial swordfish fishing technology and marine mammals. Therefore, petitioners request that the secretaries ban the importation of swordfish from any and all countries that have not satisfied the MMPA Section 101A and B requirement. Madam President, this all started with swordfish. But as the process went about and the debate went along, other conservation groups joined on, and the marine mammal part came into it. That is how all of this came about. And sometime in 2010, there was a whole series of discussion, back and forth, and consultation by the famous NOAA. And of course, it took us to the final rule in 2015, 2016. So in January 2017, this thing came into full effect. And so Senator Horsford continued to the other part, which I wouldn't go into because he brings us that, but I'm also happy that he did that. It means that he was researching. But I said I'm not bothering with him because he didn't know the piece before, so I would help him there. You see how things have changed perspective. So I say all of this to say, Madam President, that I want my goodly friend on the next side, Senator David Andrew, speak about, use a word, timely and long overdue. So I'm trying to figure out timely and long overdue, Madam President, is linked to knowledge. A lot of things they teach us in primary school, we learned 40 years afterwards that it wasn't really true. So the fact of the matter is that if we're doing the work, since in 2005, 2008, this was happening. What it shows to us, Madam President, as a country, if we want to play in the global stage, we need to know what's going on. Our ministries, our governments, our businesses, the NGOs, whatever it is, for excellence and for survival, we need to know. Because if you invest, as we speak about, the fishermen invest. There are persons who bought boat maybe 2 weeks before this was announced. How are they dealing with that? How is the bank dealing with that? Because they're going to get scared in terms of exposure. And I go to this background, Madam President, because as we debate this bill, a bill is not a piece of paper with words on it. A bill is a document, to be soft or hard copy, that contains words pertaining to measures. And when we speak about measures, measures have impact on people. That's why we make law. We don't make law to affect things. It affects people. And so every time we come here to sit down to make those regulations and laws, it's how the people will be affected. And in that regards, we have to ask ourselves how much the people were consulted in this process. That's a big question. Of course, some may say, well, it's rhetorical for me to say that. And in part, because I must say that there was some action from the government side, having a series of consultations in the stadium. There was one in Guelph. There was one, I think, in Grenville. There was supposed to be one in Carriacou, but because that wasn't scheduled officially. And I attended all of them. In fact, the chief fisheries officer said, well, you're all over? Yeah. I said, well, that is one matter that I need to be all over. And it was generally well turned out in the evening. The one in the stadium, the first one had close to 100 persons. You had some of the exporters present also, not only fisher folks. And they had concerns, but they also at the same time understood that, look, we need to put things in place. So the sort of maybe attack and cussing and vexes that one may generally expect, it wasn't there. And I don't think we should take that as a cue that people are happy. But sometimes when you analyze whether you have the blade in your hand or whether you have the handle in your hand, the fisher folks had the blade in their hand. So they had to go easy and pray that everything went right. And so we shouldn't take that accommodating forum as they are happy, because they are hurting. Of course, it was good that the discussion took place. And that meeting, series of meetings, they were supposed to have at least 1 or 2 fisher folks on a task force that was existing. Some names were taken, and I said publicly, I trust that they were contacted and invited to participate in those meetings that took place. I would follow personally on that. And I trust that they were honestly involved in the process. Because if we're dealing with legislation, an impactful thing as that, we need to have, is part of, in fact, Madam President, in fact, after first reading, this thing should have been out discussing with the fisher folks to get the input, you know, as normal best practices. Of course, we understand the urgency. And in so doing, we trust that what needs to be done will be done. Because, for example, the fisher folks' question was, we want to know what do we have to do? What we need to do? And what they need to do most time, Madam President, will be in the regulations. That's where most of these things will be. Of good, we thank our good Senator to share, and apparently she alone might have this copy because nobody else seems to have a copy of the sharing to understand what the fishermen, so they still have to wait, I would say, before this passes here, for the regulations to really take feet, because the regulation cannot exist if the principal act doesn't empower that, give the minister that power. Otherwise, it will be a sort of illegal regulation. And so we trust that these regulations come forth very quick to ensure that our fishers could meet the requirement. Because we could set the standard. And the question is, what assessment has been done in terms of the ability for our current fisher folks to meet the standard? That's an important question. In terms of the type of hooks they may use, for example, there was big debate in that meeting about J-hook and O-hook, and I learned those things myself because use the J-hook, and they say if you hold a mammal, it will be difficult to release it safely and so on, and some say, well, you have to use some O-hook. The question is, Madam President, if the O-hook would be the one that is desirous, we have to look at a few things. What is the effectiveness of this hook economically for the fisher folks? Would they hold more? Would they hold less? Then there was a debate about the size of the hook, depending on the size of the fish you hold in. So that's another scientific debate. And here you're speaking about fisher folks whose income could immediately change because of these things. Would that be regulated in terms of we must put O-hook, because in that way there is a certainty that this mammal would not be inadvertently injured? Because if the J is going to cause it somewhat, should the J really be there? Because there's a chance for it to happen. Why are we going to expose ourselves then to show, based on the statistics I saw, over 600,000 mammals on an annual basis are affected in different ways throughout the world, based on all of these things. So, in Grenada, if I'm speaking to the fisher folks and so on, they are cognizant about a lot of these things, and so they have been doing, in their own way, managing that process with whatever technology that we are currently using. They was very clear in saying that But we know how this business is. Show me. Show and tell. So where is the data? Where is the record that need to be kept? And so we need to have data sheets for them to collect this data to show we collected 500 tuna, we released 2 mammals, got some. All these records had to come back to the fisheries and be submitted to NOAA to prove that we know what we're doing and we're doing things properly. It's a new education for our fisher folks. I don't think they have a problem in doing that. The question is, where are the farms? Have they been trained with these farms over the past few weeks whilst we getting ready for this, so that things happen concurrently, which there is some concurrentness, but if the fisher folks on that end is not brought up to speed, what is going to happen, Madam President, is that we will say, well, we did our part, we passed the law, everything is in place, but then fishermen, you know, they had hard already, they think, you know, no. We're standing up now and saying, let us ensure, have they been exposed to this data capture as of now? Have they been? They should be. And would that be also in the regulation in terms of the sort of data to collected, and whether it would be manual or digital? Because we know these days you can put this thing digitally and it could help with data collection very easily. In fact, one of the greatest concerns out of the GOAV meeting is this very said issue. And it was not about data collection on the boat. You know, sometimes we always like to pass the buck and watch ourselves. Our goodly fisherman said, but when we come in, do we know? I mean, my good friend Senator Brittany is over there. He knows. Those boats will come in 2 o'clock in the evening and 1 o'clock in the evening and stuff. 12 at night, 1 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Who is there waiting in the fisheries division to collect this data? And Victoria area, we know that, I don't know who would be there, but we know for sure the challenges they face, all 2 and 3 in the morning, fish falling out of boat because you don't have no jetty and all kind of things. That's a different discussion. We're not going there today. But I just say, you know, based on my understanding, that would be a challenge. And that was raised in the meeting. And the question would arise, how do we deal with that? Because the fisher folks will do everything, and yet still, the party that is responsible, because it's a government issue, right? It's not a fisherman issue, have to ensure that there is a transparency of person working and being available. One can say, in fact, I even offered to say, well, fisher folks, we could use technology. You know, you could use a camera, you put it on the scale, and it reads it, and it digitally records it, so nobody has to be there. Maybe this is things we have to look at. Amazon dropping a package where they take a photo and they email you and they say, we drop a package. When you go, the package may not even be there, but somebody pick it up, but they drop a package.
Senator, we find your scenarios
No, it's true. It's true.
Interesting.
It's true, because you could drop in your fish with a camera.
Stick to the bill.
Oh, sorry, Madam President, sorry.
Thank you. I find those scenarios, those potential scenarios and experiences that you conjure up, I find them very interesting because they're very probable. So you may use them a little bit more leniently in relation to the undertaking to debate the bill itself. I think those are interesting points for the development of the schedule and the regulations and so on. So thank you for your patience. Continue.
Yeah, I understand, Madam President. See, because maybe my training teaches me to act in preventative mode and don't come and cry afterwards, I like to see things far. But I guess, you know, some folks prefer to see things near. So the question arises, Madam President. And I build all of this up so that we understand context, because sometimes we mustn't just see things hanging. All of this was said. We spoke about data collection. We spoke about how do we analyze and ensure there is integrity of the data. No one will ask you that. How you collect it? Where you collect it? The people trained to collect it? Because when you look at, Madam President, if you want to go there, we could go there. We can go to clause 3 in the bill that speaks of observer and monitoring program. That's where we're going. But I can't just bring us there like that, because the bill here leaves it hanging. And if you read it like that, you'll end up in trouble. The question is, you can do, if you read, you can do digital monitoring, and the Fisher folks spoke about that. There is a record there in that mentioning about the digital recording, which involves a camera that would monitor things like a surveillance camera. But it's good that you also have to cater for manual, because not everybody could afford. So the question arises, this observer and monitoring program, it's not clear to me how this is going to be implemented. For example, I understand there will be an observer, and there will be a series of observers. I take it and understand that they will have some certification that they are authentic. I understand that part. But what I don't understand is if each vessel will have an observer. That's the first question. Because the amount of vessels I hear about here today, Madam President, and the rate of unemployment in this country, I wonder if you'll get enough people, because almost everybody is employed, to go out on this boat as observers. Well, 900 boats. All may not be commercial boats, admit. Understand that. The question is, do we need an observer on each boat? Because my understanding, when the fisher folks go outside, we have to understand this thing. They go sometime in what we call in groups. They may go 4 or 5 of them, they're in a fishing ground. So the question sometimes is, do you really need one observer for one boat? Or can you get one observer to deal with a cluster of boats? Because they're in that general broad area. We need to understand these things. Because when it comes to implementation, right now, the boatman wondering, and who paying this other observer? Because this person may not able to be another regular fisher person on the boat, because, and who is paying them? Is it the fisher folks have to pay them as part of the requirement as you have a truck assistant? And if that's the case, we know what's going to happen. As we increase the cost of production and the cost of things, this is not an assumption. Somebody has to bear the cost. Is government going to subsidize that? And this is one of the biggest issues that comes with this bill. Not because it happens, Madam President. It happens. Regulations come and it's going to cost us in different ways. What is this cost going to be like? Is it $10,000, $20,000? And that was again discussed in the forums, in which the Julie Minister was also present, in terms of making funds, loans, a grant, as the case may be, available to help them through this period, if it's for a 1-year period or 90-day period, to get them out. Because at the end of the day, this bill we are discussing here, Madam President, is not to prevent the fisher folks from fishing, it's to grow the industry. In fact, this is an enabling bill, a bill to move forward. And so all parts of it must be so oiled and tuned to deliver us there. Madam President, the issue of the FAD, I don't even know about something called FAD, Fish Aggregating Device. This is a technology that has been introduced to Grenada in recent times, and it assists. In fact, in Grenville, there is a FAD group, a FAD association. Now, this is not a boat. This is an area where they have this, make up different material to create like a breeding ground. how does that also be taken into consideration in the regulations pertaining to this bill? Because let us not lose sight, Madam President, that this bill is not about marine mammals and whether they kill or they ain't killing, or whether they die or how much die. That is part of it. But there is deeper parts that we fail to understand. Something called stock count. Read the bill. It's there, not our bill. Read them. And the point that Senator Good Doctor raised, we have to ensure that what we're doing here could match up side by side or even exceed the requirements that the U.S. has set, not only for Grenada, for the world. So this is why I'm raising this issue, because the issue of conservation practices and the impact and measuring your stock and all of these things, it relate to your FAD and it relate to all those other areas. I'm saying this, Madam President, with due respect to all of us and respect to the fisher folks, but more respect to those guys that are involved in Lambi and Conch. Because since 2022, we cannot ship conch because of the same exact reasons I've not been able to come to account. That matter ain't solved yet. Ain't solved yet. Up to about 2 months ago, they had some work and some progress was being made. So I'm not speaking here because of this. I'm speaking because of experience, knowledge, and understanding of what I've seen before. I've seen this movie before. So I don't want us to go there. As I sum up, Madam President, I call on all our fisher folks and all in industry to be ready for all opportunities that will be provided by this government, such that they can be well placed and ready to ship come early January. They must be ready. Without the government ready, they not do business. They must be ready. And that the government must do all that it takes to ensure that what they need to know and do is well in place. I'll be monitoring very closely this development because, as our good friend, leader of government business say, it's a $500 million industry, and it might even be more. Not only about the exports, but about our own health and well-being. And so Senator Rahman's question begs at this stage. In anything you're doing, you must have a plan B and a plan C. And these are not propositions and suppositions. When January 1st comes, the fisher folks ask the same question. And I know they have been meeting with the government in different ways. And some of the responses maybe cannot be made publicly for strategic reasons. What will happen to the fisher folks and the fish? Amerijet, Madam President, one of the major shipping airlines, even though they have their own problems too, ships 40, 50,000 pounds of fish, and you're able to get your soursop and all those other things going on board because that makes it economically viable. A big soursop trade at what, over $12 million, employ hundreds of persons, thousands of farmers. So this $500 million industry that we're speaking about in fishing, the impact of not having to ship from an economic standpoint, a macroeconomic standpoint that was outlined by our good leader of government business, could easily be $1 billion. Close to maybe how much our national budget does be? A lot of money. So this is a serious issue. And I don't want us to miss it because there is complementarity in that. And I speak here on behalf of the Fresh Produce Exporters Association because that is a burning concern of them. So with these few words, Madam President, and it was very few words. We support this bill, but more so we call for swift action for those elements around this bill and the regulations that would empower and allow our fisher folks to be able to be ready for business come January. We call for that if we need to come back here to make some adjustments to this bill, that is done swiftly and we don't lose time, because those things can happen. We understand that we need to send this thing to NOAA to observe it, to give feedback, and let us not be shy. We always sometimes fall short sometime, and there's nothing wrong in coming back and say we need to make these little changes to fix it. I wouldn't say I was long-sighted or short-sighted. I would say this is how the cookie crumbles sometimes. At this stage, Madam President, I thank you.
And I thank you, Senator Sinclair, for the focus on readiness and preparedness of fishermen and fisherwomen by January. And I just wanted to interject, which I suppose your research would have revealed to you, that the real authority around this is FAO. As you would know, it passed, I believe in the early 2000, it passed a regulation on comparability for the protection of marine mammals. The U.S. is important to the Grenada market, and we have to focus on that. But being aware also that there are standards at the global level, particularly for us SIDS, and we are thus also under the guidance, if not the binding regulations of FAO. I should take this opportunity, and I do take this opportunity, to thank you in your capacity as a fisheries representative in the Senate, and the Minister of Fisheries, I think, is in our Senate as well. Thank both of you for the work you're doing and continue to do, and encourage you as we take this forward. Thank you. The Leader of Government Business in the Senate, Senator Adrian Thomas.
Thank you, Madam President, and I must join with you in commending the Fisheries Senator for his presentation. I must say that I catered for an hour, and I think I got a little less than that, so you cannot deprive me today. But Madam President, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all the senators that made presentation and for the unanimous support of this very important piece of legislation. And in the same breath, I want to thank the minister and his task force within the ministry, the new ministry that we have, the Ministry of the Blue Economy that we have put together just on a year ago. And this is a ministry that is really and truly in the forefront of making sure that those things happen. Madam President, I want to also make the point, and I didn't hear it in the House for the day, but sometimes you go to this regional forum and you hear about small island development states. And most of the time that I have to speak on those subjects, I prefer to refer to places like Grenada as big ocean states, because the statistics have shown that what we own outside there is about 75 times or more, or greater than the land mass that we have. So the ocean outside there is a big, big thing for us, and this very important industry is where it comes from. Madam President, I want to raise a few issues here. And I want to remind this House that although the United States may have made the demand on us in regards to NOAA and the important issue that we are dealing here with today, we should not limit ourselves to just fixing to satisfy that demand. As I said in my presentation, it's a golden opportunity for we to rise to the occasion and set standards, so while we are trying to satisfy the demand that is met, that was laid upon us, and we're dealing with today, we should look at opportunities, other opportunities where other people, rather than making demands, they could be requesting the blue gold that we have in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And also, I made the point, we have to start You know, my good Senator David Andrews left a while ago. But I made the point to him, you know, there are local restaurants in Grenada complaining that they cannot get yellowfin tuna to buy. The question is, are we consuming much of the fish that we produce? The answer is yes, but can we consume more? We need to open up our minds. Madam President, processing are all opportunities that present itself now. And I want to refer, I think the concern was raised in regards to, I think by Senator Nolan Cox, in regards to the, who will be affected, whether it's the small vessels or whether it's, everybody will be affected. The question is, Madam President, what sparked the demand by NOAA and the response by Grenada really and truly is the yellowfin tuna. And basically, the ordinary guy who has a boat and a registered fisherman doing sea moss, doing little snapper and lobster and those sort of things would not be affected by that. Basically, what we are talking about here, boats involved in long lining for yellowfin tuna and other pelagic species. These are large and small boats. The long lining technology has the potential to have interaction with marine mammals other than rock fishing or shooting, and the case may be. So really and truly, you're not talking about every single boat. It's basically a yellowfin industry that we have to be concerned about. So, having said that, Madam President, I want to say once again, thank you very much for your contributions, and I now look forward to we approving this very important bill.
Thank you. I'm not sure of the regulation here. I want to ask you two clarification questions for my own purpose. So the idea is that the yellowfin tuna is to be protected under this regulation more than it currently is. I ask the question because, I mean, the focus is on the mammal, the marine mammal, and
yeah, but no, sorry.
Yes, so
yes, Madam President, the possibility of interacting with marine mammals is basically, it would not happen within the confinement of the rocks and shoreline fishing, or the case may be. Is the long line fishermen, fisherfolk, who will, the possibility of looking for tuna, will interact with what we are concerned about, the mammals and so on.
And the other question I've been dying to ask, and I think you're the perfect person to ask, will the price of fish increase for me, for our country? I think that's...
Madam President, I guess that this will be driven by demands and supply.
As we...
and I will ask the Senator Rahman to intervene.
When all the new regulations are in place, the new equipment is purchased, the new observers are paid, the new registration occurs, does that raise the price of fish for the ordinary Grenadian in January 1?
Madam President, market forces and demand and supply affect pricing on every commodity. So the answer could be yes. As to how and how it is cushioned or how it is implemented, that can be worked on, because we have to make sure that we want our nation to eat healthy. Because if you don't pay it, if you don't pay attention to it up front, you've got to pay it in the hospital. So that is a difficult question to answer, the how. But with regulation, usually comes an additional cost, and God knows best.
Thank you, diplomat. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a second time. All those in favor say aye. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025.
Senator Thomas.
Madam President, I beg to move that the Senate resolve itself in a committee of the whole Senate and consider the bill clause by clause.
Thank you, honorable members. The question is that the Honorable House resolves itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. All those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye? Good, pay attention. And all those who are of the opposite view say no. Ayes have it. We are now in committee. Thank you.
Clause 2, amendment to Section 2 of the Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 2 forms part of the bill. All those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary view say nay. Passed.
Clause 3, insertion of new Section 28A to the Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 3, the insertion of new Section 28A, forms part of the bill. All those who are of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary view say nay. Passed.
Clause 4, amendment of Section 40 of the Principal Act.
Honourable members, the question is that Section 4, the amendment of Section 40 of the Principal Act, should form part of the bill. All those who are of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honourable members, the question is that Clause 1, on short title of the bill, forms part of the bill. All those who are of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary opinion say nay. Ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that the Senate resumes and the chair of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the Senate resumes and the chair reports progress on the bill. All of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary say nay. The Senate committee is closed. Senate resumes. Honourable members, I have the honour to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole and was passed without amendment. Minister, Honourable Senator Adrian Thomas.
Madam President, I beg to move that the chair's report be adopted.
Honourable members, the question is that the chair's report be adopted. All those who have that opinion say aye, and of the contrary opinion say nay. Report is adopted. Senator Adrian Thomas.
Madam President, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time. All those who have that opinion say aye, and of the contrary opinion say nay. Passed.
a bill for an act shortly entitled the Fisheries Amendment Bill 2025.
Item number 16, public business. Item number 17, adjournment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg for the adjournment of the Senate. Sign the die.
Senator Claudette Joseph? Gloria. No, can't see. Well, Senator Gloria Thomas, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I did not take the opportunity to present a ministerial statement, but I just want to update the House on a few activities as it relates to the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. I wish to inform this House that we have now rolled out our seed beneficiary card 100%. So all beneficiaries in every parish now have the card to access the funds at the end of a month. Our ministry commemorated International Men's Day on the 19th. Prior to that, we had a series of activities where we work with our young men, sensitizing them and trying to encourage them to be positive role models in society. We ended the celebration with a match, a basketball match on the court in Cuthbert Peters Park on Wednesday, St. Mark's against St. John's. It was a real fun-filled activity, and a number of them came out to just interact and to socialize, and I think that was really good. We also held a training for media personnel on disability awareness, encouraging the media to be sensitive in the way they cover stories that involves persons with disability. And that was held this week at the Radisson, and it was very successful. We also had another training, another activity, where we focus on sensitizing the public on women, the need to be aware of women who are violated. And we will start the 16 days of activism from the 25th of this month, where we'll further go into this activity. So we will be looking at digital violence experienced by our women as we commemorate or go through the 16 days of activism from the 20th of December to the 20th of this month to the 10th of December. So this is just what I want to update the House about as it relates to the work of the Ministry of Social and Community Development. We also have the Build Back Equal project coming on, where we will be doing a pilot of 25 women, training them and providing some support for them to take them out of seed. So after this training and the support, we will be providing the necessary services for them so that they can be empowered, and gradually they'll be taken out from seed. And depending on how successful this initiative will be, we will do another batch, and hopefully at a point in time, the young women especially will be able to become entrepreneurs and so on, where they can take charge of their own lives. So we rolling out this program to build capacity so people will not depend on seed as much as. So thank you so very much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you for your report, Senator. The social health of the nation is critical, in fact, it's foundational. And I take this opportunity to belatedly wish all the men in the Senate and all the men who support the Senate to congratulate you. I can't wish you Happy Men's Day anymore, it's past. But to congratulate you on being wonderful men in all dimensions of your life, public and private. And to encourage the country to be involved in the 16 days of activism to end violence against women. 16 days of activism to end violence against women is starting. And to remind you also that the 10th of December is Human Rights Day, World Human Rights Day. That's when the Universal Declaration on Human Rights was passed in 1948. It's a critical document in which the human rights culture and protocols of the 20th century were built. Of course, the first human rights convention was the one again, Anti-Slavery Convention of 1909. It all stems from that, and as products of the post-slavery era, we must always find pride and inspiration from the fact that the current human rights regime that holds in the world now really started in 1909 with the prohibition on a human rights level against slavery after it had been abolished in the 1830s. Finally, let me say that we are on the advent of the holiday season. We will, as a Senate, we anticipate, of course, meeting in December, starting with the presentation of the budget. If I'm allowed to announce it here, I don't know if it's my place or somebody else's place. The Attorney General will no doubt clarify. But we will have the budget presentation and the sitting of the Senate. I would like to invite the two leaders to meet me in my office immediately concluding this meeting so that we'll take a look at some of the modalities that we are called to be engaged in concerning the budget debate. Senator Quince Britton, you have requested the floor and you have it.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, it's now afternoon, and I know everybody will be anticipating lunch. Quickly, Madam President, just a quick update from our ministry, from the Ministry of Tourism, the Creative Economy and Culture. Specifically to tourism, last time I extended an invitation inviting everyone to the ComSpan event. That was very successful. So far, we were able to distribute to several communities in the various parishes, including Carriacou and Petit Martinique. I think we only have 2 parishes that needs to be the funds that is allocated for them, that needs to be delivered. That's St. Andrews and St. George. So we expect the program to roll out in full effect come January in the various communities, happening twice a week, as I mentioned before, and happening simultaneously. The Cameroon Folk Festival, Madam President, is back this year. It's from December 5th to the 7th at the Sotes bus terminal. This year's theme is Echoes of Cameroon, Deep Roots, Strong Heritage, Bright Future. So we're inviting everyone here in this house to be a part of. There will be a lot of activities, especially a lot of local entrepreneurs who would be there, so you come and support Buy Local, as well as many cultural activities from the various schools and community groups. So we're inviting everyone to the Kamahon Folk Festival. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. Honorable members, Senator Rahman.
One brief clarification, Madam President. I think it's important for us to understand it's a little bit about economics. I'll just be quick. You asked a question, and I mentioned that it depends on market forces, and that is true. I want to just quickly mention that it depends on what you eat, because if you like tuna, tuna is generally more expensive. If there is a limited supply of tuna and the bulk of it is exported, when it resumes, then perhaps the price will go up. But if the export does not resume when it's supposed to be, then there will be an oversupply of tuna on the market and the price may likely drop. So it depends. That may have no effect on the regular fish that we consume, snapper and the ones closer to shore. And also, if it is that there is a lapse between the restart of the shipping to the US, perhaps all fish may go up slightly because they have their bills to pay. So there are so many variables. I just wanted to touch on some of them to give you that's why there's no definite answer on this, to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I know you didn't eat your parents' school fees, so thank you for elaborating. What I think it does show is that we will continue to have a healthy fish supply in the country, either for export or for expanded domestic consumption. Either way, it's good for us. I once spoke to a restaurant owner in New York who told me he'd just come from the wharf in New York, and he purchased a tuna from the Caribbean, he didn't say from where, for $28,000 US for one tuna. And this is a decade ago. I was stunned. And that's the sort of price that tuna, bluefin or otherwise, yellowfin or otherwise, fetches on the US, New York market. Distinguished senators, the motion is that this honorable House adjourn, sine die. All those who are of that opinion say aye, and of the contrary opinion say nay. The Senate House is adjourned.